My husband said, "Your mother's nursing home visits are pathetic. Stop wasting time on her." So I never visited again. That decision shattered his reputation completely. My husband Greg said those words while I was packing homemade cookies for my mother's weekly visit to Riverside Care Center. He stood in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed and that look on his face like I was doing something embarrassing. Your mother doesn't even recognize you anymore. Those visits are pathetic and you're wasting entire afternoons sitting with someone who thinks you're a nurse. Stop going. It's depressing to watch you chase after her approval when she doesn't even know who you are. I felt my hands stop moving and I stared at the cookies I'd spent 2 hours baking because Mom always loved snickerdoodles even though she couldn't remember teaching me the recipe. Greg walked over and took the container from my hands. "I'm serious, Lauren. You need to stop this. It's unhealthy and it's affecting our life. Every Wednesday you disappear for 4 hours to sit with a woman who's already gone. I want my wife back." I looked at him and saw he genuinely believed he was being reasonable. "Okay," I said quietly. "I won't visit her anymore." Greg smiled and kissed my forehead like I'd just agreed to something wonderful. "Good. Now we can actually enjoy our weekends without you being all sad and distracted." He put the cookies in the trash and walked away. I stood there watching snickerdoodles disappear under coffee grounds and wondered when my husband had become someone I didn't recognize. That Wednesday, I didn't go to Riverside. I stayed home and cleaned the house while Greg was at work. My phone rang 3 times from the nursing home, but I didn't answer because Greg said I was wasting time and he must have been right. Thursday morning, the director of nursing called again. "Mrs. Holloway, your mother was asking for you yesterday. She had a very lucid moment and kept saying your name. We thought you'd want to know." I felt something crack inside my chest, but I said I'd been busy and hung up. Greg came home that evening happy because I'd made his favorite dinner instead of spending my afternoon at Riverside. "See? Doesn't this feel better? You're less stressed already." I nodded and served him pot roast while thinking about Mom asking for me. Friday afternoon, my sister Bethany called crying. "Why didn't you visit Mom on Wednesday? The nurses said she waited by the window for hours. She remembered you, Lauren. She actually remembered and you weren't there." I explained that Greg thought the visits were pathetic and wasting time. Bethany went silent for a long moment. "He said what?" I repeated Greg's exact words, and Bethany's voice went cold. "You're telling me your husband called caring for your own mother pathetic? And you just agreed?" I felt defensive. He's right that she usually doesn't recognize me. Maybe it is pointless. Bethany said something I couldn't quite hear, and then hung up. Saturday morning, Bethany showed up at our house with our brother Kyle. Greg answered the door and they pushed past him into the living room. "We need to talk about what you said to Lauren about her mother," Bethany said, and her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Greg looked confused. "What are you talking about?" Kyle stepped forward. "You told my sister that visiting her dying mother was pathetic. You threw away cookies she made and told her to stop wasting time on the woman who raised her." Greg's face flushed. "That's not exactly what I said. You're twisting my words." Bethany pulled out her phone. "Lauren, repeat exactly what Greg said to you about Mom." I felt trapped between my husband and my siblings, but I told them word for word. Greg tried to interrupt, but Kyle held up his hand. "Let her finish." When I got to the part about Mom being already gone, Bethany started recording on her phone. "Say that again, Greg. Tell us how you really feel about a woman with Alzheimer's trying to see her daughter." Greg's face went from red to white. "You're recording this? This is a private family matter." Bethany smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Mom's health is a family matter. You're just the guy who married in, and now everyone's going to know exactly what kind of person you are." Kyle pulled out his phone and started typing while Bethany kept her camera pointed at Greg. "I'm posting this in the family group chat right now. All 43 relatives are going to hear what you said." Greg lunged for Kyle's phone, but Kyle was faster. "Too late. It's sent." Within 30 seconds, my phone started buzzing with messages. Aunt Dorothy wrote that she couldn't believe anyone would be so cruel. Uncle Frank said Greg should be ashamed. My cousin Rebecca, who was a nurse, wrote 3 paragraphs about the importance of family presence for dementia patients. Greg's own mother called his phone and I could hear her yelling from across the room. "How dare you tell Lauren not to visit her mother? What kind of man did I raise?" Greg tried to explain, but his mother hung up on him. His father called next, and the conversation lasted less than a minute before Greg threw his phone across the room. "This is insane. You're all making me out to be some kind of monster over a private conversation." Bethany lowered her phone. "You are a monster. You isolated your wife from her dying mother because it was inconvenient for you. That's not a private conversation. That's elder abuse by proxy." Greg's best friend Austin called within an hour. I could hear Austin's voice through the speaker asking if it was true that Greg had called hospice visits pathetic. Greg said it was being blown out of proportion, but Austin said, "Man, my mom died of Alzheimer's last year. If my wife had wanted to visit every single day, I would have driven her myself. What's wrong with you?" Austin hung up and Greg stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. The doorbell rang, and it was our neighbor Ellen holding a casserole. "I heard about what's happening, and I wanted to bring this for Lauren. I can't imagine being told not to see your own mother." She looked at Greg with pure disgust. "My husband died 2 years ago, and I would give anything for one more visit. You should be ashamed." She handed me the casserole and left without another word. Greg turned to me. "Are you going to let everyone talk to me like this? Tell them they don't understand." I looked at the casserole and thought about Mom waiting by the window. They understand perfectly. You told me my mother was pathetic. Those were your exact words. Greg's jaw tightened. I was trying to protect you from pain. Watching her decline is killing you. Bethany stood up. That wasn't your decision to make, and now you're going to face consequences. By Sunday morning, Greg's phone was flooded with messages from people we hadn't heard from in years. His college roommate wrote that he'd lost all respect for him. His cousin said the family was embarrassed. His aunt uninvited us from Thanksgiving dinner with a message that said, "We don't welcome people who abandon elderly parents." Greg's boss, Jeremy, called and asked to speak with both of us. Jeremy's mother had been in a nursing home for 3 years. "Greg, I need to know if what I'm hearing is accurate. Did you really tell Lauren not to visit her mother?" Greg tried to explain his reasoning, but Jeremy cut him off. "I don't care about your reasoning. What I care about is character. And this shows me something about yours that I didn't know before." Jeremy said he wasn't firing Greg, but he was removing him from the family values marketing campaign they'd been working on. "I can't have someone representing our company's commitment to family when you're stopping your wife from seeing hers." Greg hung up and his hands were shaking. "This is getting out of control. People are acting like I committed a crime." Kyle looked up from his phone. "You committed something worse. You made Lauren choose between her dying mother and keeping you happy. That's manipulation and emotional abuse." Monday morning, Greg went to work and came home 2 hours later looking sick. Someone put flyers in the parking lot. They had my photo and a quote about what I said. Everyone in the building saw them. He showed me a photo someone had sent him. The flyer had Greg's LinkedIn picture and the words, "Greg Holloway thinks visiting your elderly mother is pathetic and a waste of time. Is this the kind of person you want to work with?" At the bottom, it listed his company name and phone number. Greg called the police, but they said unless he could prove who made the flyers, there wasn't much they could do. "It's not illegal to share someone's own words," the officer said. Greg spent the rest of the day trying to figure out who was responsible. Bethany posted on Facebook about the situation without naming Greg directly, but everyone knew who she meant. When someone tells you that loving your dying parent is pathetic, believe them the first time. They're showing you exactly who they are. The post got 200 shares in 4 hours. Greg's coworkers started treating him differently. His work friend Megan stopped inviting him to lunch. His project partner David requested a transfer to a different team. Greg came home Wednesday looking destroyed. David said he can't work with someone who has such a fundamental lack of empathy. HR is investigating workplace compatibility issues. I started visiting Mom again on Wednesday afternoons. Greg didn't try to stop me, but he didn't speak to me either. At Riverside, Mom was having one of her clear days. "Where were you last week, sweetheart? I missed you." I started crying and told her I was sorry. She patted my hand and said, "Don't cry. You're here now." The nursing director pulled me aside. "We've been getting calls from people saying your husband tried to prevent you from visiting. I need to know if that's true because we take family interference very seriously." I told her everything and she made notes. "We're updating our records to list you as the primary contact and decision maker. Your husband will not be given any information about your mother's care or condition." She paused. "Between you and me, what he did is a form of isolation abuse. If you need resources for support, I can connect you with social services." I thanked her and went back to sit with Mom. She was doing a puzzle and asked me to help. We spent 2 hours putting together a picture of a garden, and she told me stories about growing roses when I was little. When I got home, Greg was waiting. "Did you tell the nursing home about our private conversation?" I set down my purse. They asked, and I told the truth. "You're no longer listed as a contact for my mother's care." Greg's face went dark. "You're turning everyone against me over this. Your family, my job, and now you're excluding me from medical decisions." I felt something shift inside me. "You excluded yourself when you called my mother pathetic. You don't get to isolate me from her and then complain when there are consequences." Greg stepped closer. "I'm your husband. That should count for something." I stepped back. Being my husband means supporting me, especially during hard times. You failed at that completely. Greg grabbed his keys. "I'm going to stay at Austin's for a few days. Maybe you'll calm down and see how ridiculous everyone is being." He left and I called Bethany. She came over with wine and we talked until midnight. "Are you thinking about divorce?" she asked. I said I didn't know, but I couldn't look at Greg the same way anymore. "Good," Bethany said. "Because he showed you he values his convenience over your grief. That's not someone who loves you the way you deserve." Thursday morning, Greg's mother called me. "I'm so sorry about my son's behavior. I raised him better than this and I'm ashamed." She said she'd set up a trust fund for Mom's care at Riverside, and that Greg wasn't getting a penny of his inheritance until he apologized properly and meant it. "I'm changing my will today. He needs to learn that actions have consequences." Friday afternoon, I got a call from a local news reporter. Someone had sent them Bethany's Facebook post and they wanted to interview me about elder care and family dynamics. I declined, but they ran a story anyway using public information and quotes from Bethany. The headline read, "Local woman pressured to abandon mother in nursing home." Greg's name wasn't used, but enough details were included that people who knew us could figure it out. Greg called me screaming, "Now it's on the news? You're destroying my reputation over a misunderstanding." I hung up on him. Austin called me an hour later. "Greg's been staying here and he won't stop talking about how unfair this all is. He genuinely doesn't understand why people are upset. It's like he has no empathy at all. Austin said Greg needed professional help, but refused to consider therapy. He thinks everyone else is the problem. I can't have him here anymore. He's bringing down my whole household. Greg showed up at the house Saturday morning with luggage. Austin kicked me out. Are you happy now? I looked at him standing on our porch looking like a stranger. I'm not happy at all. I'm sad that the man I married would rather I abandon my dying mother than be inconvenienced for a few hours each week. Greg dropped his bags. I never said abandon. I said stop wasting so much time on someone who doesn't know you. I felt rage boil up. She knew me last week. She was lucid and asking for me, and I wasn't there because you convinced me it was pointless. Greg's company held an ethics review on Monday. 3 employees had filed complaints saying they felt uncomfortable working with someone who demonstrated such callous disregard for family obligations. Greg's boss Jeremy explained that while Greg's personal life was his business, his actions reflected on the company's values. We pride ourselves on supporting employees through difficult times. What you did contradicts everything we stand for. They put Greg on a performance improvement plan that included mandatory sensitivity training. Greg came home furious. They're treating me like I'm some kind of criminal. All because I had an opinion about how you spend your time. I was packing clothes into a suitcase. Where are you going? Greg asked. I zipped the bag closed. I'm staying with Bethany for a while. I can't be around you right now. Greg blocked the doorway. You're leaving me over this? Everyone's overreacting and now you're abandoning our marriage? I pushed past him. You told me to abandon my mother. Now you know how it feels. I drove to Bethany's house and she helped me carry my things inside. You can stay as long as you need. Kyle's already talking to a divorce attorney friend just in case. I thanked her and called Mom's nursing home to let them know where I'd be staying. The director said Mom was having more lucid days and kept asking about family photos. Would you like to bring some albums? It might help stimulate her memory. I said I would come by tomorrow with everything I could find. Greg showed up at Riverside on Wednesday trying to see Mom. The security guard stopped him at the front desk. You're not on the approved visitor list, sir. I can't let you through. Greg argued that he was family, but the director came out and explained that only people on my approved list could visit. Your wife specifically requested you be excluded after you discouraged her from visiting her own mother. Greg called me from the parking lot. You're blocking me from seeing your mom? That's incredibly petty. I stayed calm. You said visiting her was pathetic and a waste of time. I'm just saving you from wasting your time. Greg sputtered and hung up. My cousin Rebecca, the nurse, called that evening. I heard Greg tried to visit your mom. That's rich considering what he said about her. Rebecca said she'd shared the story with her nursing network, and several people had similar experiences with spouses or family members who didn't understand dementia care. You're not alone in this. And what Greg did was worse than people realize because isolation is one of the most harmful things for dementia patients. She sent me research articles about the importance of family visits, and I saved them all. Thursday morning, Greg's father called me. I want to apologize for my son's behavior. My wife and I are appalled. We're taking you out for dinner to show our support. We met that evening, and Greg's parents spent 2 hours telling me about their own experiences with aging parents. His mother cried. My mother had Alzheimer's, and I visited her every single day until she died. If my husband had told me not to go, I would have divorced him immediately. Greg's social media was flooded with comments from people he hadn't spoken to in years. His high school girlfriend wrote, "Glad I dodged that bullet." His fraternity brothers posted in their group chat about being disappointed. His nephew, who was studying social work, wrote a long post about elder abuse and tagged Greg without naming him directly. Greg deleted all his social media accounts by Friday. He called me from a new number I didn't recognize. Are you satisfied now? I've lost friends, respect at work, and my own family thinks I'm a monster. All because I tried to protect you from watching your mother suffer. I sat in Bethany's living room staring at my phone. You didn't try to protect me. You tried to control me because my grief was inconvenient for you. There's a difference. Greg's voice cracked. I miss you. Can we please talk about this in person? I said I wasn't ready and hung up. Mom had another lucid day on Saturday, and I brought the photo albums. We spent 3 hours looking at pictures, and she remembered nearly everything. This was your 5th birthday. You wanted a purple cake, and I stayed up all night making fondant flowers. She pointed to another photo. This was the day you graduated college. I was so proud. She looked at me with clear eyes. Where's Greg? He usually comes with you. I felt my throat tighten. He's not coming anymore, Mom. She patted my hand. That's probably for the best, sweetheart. He never looked at you the way a man should look at the woman he loves. Greg's company decided not to renew his contract at the end of the quarter. Jeremy called to explain that while the ethics review hadn't resulted in termination, several clients had expressed concerns about working with Greg after hearing about the situation. In our business, reputation is everything. I'm sorry, but we have to protect the company's image. Greg was devastated. He showed up at Bethany's house where I was staying. I lost my job because of you. Because you couldn't keep a private conversation private. Bethany stepped outside. You lost your job because you revealed who you really are. Don't blame Lauren for your own words. Greg looked at me. 5 years of marriage, and you're throwing it away because I had an opinion. I stepped forward. You didn't have an opinion. You gave me an ultimatum. Stop seeing my dying mother or deal with your disappointment and guilt trips. That's not a partnership. That's control. Greg's shoulders slumped. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I was frustrated seeing you hurt every week. Bethany laughed harshly. So your solution was to cut her off from the person causing the hurt rather than supporting her through it? That's textbook narcissism. Greg left without another word, and I watched his car disappear down the street feeling nothing but relief. The divorce papers were filed in November. Greg contested everything, claiming I'd destroyed his reputation and career through malicious defamation. My attorney was a woman named Judith Kramer, who specialized in cases involving emotional manipulation. His claim won't hold up. You shared his exact words with family members who asked direct questions. That's not defamation. That's honesty. She showed me evidence Greg's lawyer had submitted, including screenshots of Facebook posts and the news article. He's trying to claim you orchestrated a campaign against him, but the evidence shows people reacted organically to learning what he said. You can't control how others respond to your spouse's cruelty. The deposition was scheduled for January. Greg sat across from me looking thinner and older. His lawyer asked why I'd shared private marital conversations with family members. Because they asked why I stopped visiting my mother and I told them the truth. Greg said the visits were pathetic and a waste of time. He threw away cookies I'd made for her and told me to stop going. Greg's lawyer tried to rephrase. But you shared this information knowing it would damage your husband's reputation? Judith objected. My client shared factual information about her husband's words and behavior. She's not responsible for how others judge those facts. The lawyer switched tactics. Mrs. Holloway, isn't it true that your mother's dementia is quite advanced and she rarely recognizes you? I felt anger surge. My mother has Alzheimer's. Some days she knows me, and some days she doesn't. But every visit matters because I love her and she's still my mother regardless of what she remembers. Greg's lawyer presented evidence that I'd been stressed and emotional about Mom's decline. Isn't it possible your husband was genuinely concerned about your mental health? Judith stood up. Let's be clear about what happened. Mr. Holloway didn't suggest therapy or grief counseling. He didn't offer to attend visits with his wife for support. He told her the visits were pathetic and literally threw away baked goods intended for her mother. That's not concern. That's control. She pulled out statements from the Riverside nursing director, 3 nurses, and a social worker, all explaining the importance of family visits for dementia patients. Mr. Holloway's actions didn't protect his wife. They isolated her from her dying mother during a critical time. Greg's lawyer had no response. The judge reviewing the case was a woman in her 60s who'd been taking notes throughout. Mr. Holloway, I want to hear from you directly. Why did you tell your wife not to visit her mother? Greg shifted in his seat. Your Honor, I was watching my wife suffer every week. She'd come home crying after visits. I thought if she took a break, she'd feel better. The judge looked at him over her reading glasses. Did you consult with any medical professionals about this decision? Greg shook his head. Did you discuss it with your wife before issuing what sounds like an ultimatum? Greg hesitated. I expressed my opinion. The judge made a note. You expressed an opinion that led your wife to stop visiting her dying mother. And when that mother had a lucid moment asking for her daughter, your wife wasn't there. Do you understand the harm you caused? Greg started to answer, but the judge held up her hand. I've read the evidence submitted by both parties. What I see is a pattern of isolation and control disguised as concern. Mr. Holloway, your actions had consequences. Your family, friends, and employer all judged you based on your own words. That's not defamation. That's accountability. She ruled in my favor on every contested point. I got the house, the car, and Greg was ordered to pay my legal fees. I'm also ordering Mr. Holloway to complete a domestic violence awareness program focusing on emotional abuse and isolation tactics. This behavior is a red flag that needs to be addressed. Greg's face went pale. I never hit her. This isn't domestic violence. The judge's expression hardened. Abuse isn't just physical, Mr. Holloway. You attempted to cut your wife off from her primary support system during a crisis. That's emotional abuse, whether you recognize it or not. The divorce was finalized in March. Greg moved to another state for a job, and I heard through mutual acquaintances that he told people there he was widowed rather than divorced. He couldn't handle people knowing the truth. Mom passed away in May, surrounded by family. She had a lucid moment in her final hours and squeezed my hand. I'm glad you kept coming, sweetheart. Some people would have given up. I stayed with her until the end and never once regretted the hours I'd spent at Riverside. Greg's mother reached out after Mom's funeral. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your mother was a wonderful woman, and I'm sorry my son couldn't see that. She said Greg had called asking to be included in the funeral service. I told him absolutely not. He lost the right to be there when he called her pathetic. She handed me an envelope. This is the money I'd set aside for Greg's inheritance. I want you to have it. Use it for something that honors your mother. Inside was a check for $50,000. I used it to establish a fund at Riverside for families who couldn't afford memory care. The plaque read, In memory of Margaret Chen, beloved mother. May all families have the time and support to love their elders well. Greg tried to call when he heard about the fund, but I never answered. His attempt to control my grief had cost him everything that mattered. His marriage, his job, his family's respect, and his community standing. The last I heard, he was living alone and telling people his ex-wife had turned everyone against him over a misunderstanding. He still couldn't admit what he'd really done. 2 years later, I remarried a man who understood that loving someone means supporting them through the hardest moments. When his father developed Parkinson's, I drove him to every appointment and sat with them both because that's what family does. We visited the memorial fund at Riverside on what would have been Mom's birthday, and I told her about my new life, one where love wasn't conditional on convenience, and grief wasn't pathetic but sacred. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.